This is not the way to approach the offseason, in my opinion. How many $100 million contracts can we get? How many $100 million players are actually out there? How many legitimate market value $100 million players are out there? Okay. So let's eliminate the shortstops as long as they're going to be out there wanting $250 to $350 million. Okay. How many $100 million players? Maybe Kevin Gossman's a $100 million player, right? It's possible. Maybe Marcus Semien, right? Like who else out there is legitimately and clearly worth $100 million? It's hard to think of, isn't it? Like, I have the list of free agents in front of me, and it is difficult to do. Okay, Clayton Kershaw isn't a $100 million player because he's 34 years old, but he's either going back to the Dodgers or he's done. Same with Max Scherzer. He's either going to a World Series elite or he's done. Who else is worth $100 million? Who? Buster Posey has an option, but even if they decline it, he's 35 years old. Chris Bryant, is he a $100 million player? He could be. So we're talking about Gossman, Bryant, and Semien. There's got to be like 2 or 3 more. I thought there were 5. Let's see. Stroman's probably not getting $100 million. Greinke's 483 years old. He's not getting $100 million. Freddie Freeman probably gets $100 million from somewhere. He's 32 years old, but he's a first baseman, so you'd expect him to age just fine over the next 5 years. So that's probably another one. That there aren't many. Like, are you going to give? You're not giving Charlie Morton $100 million. He's 38 years old. Brandon Belt, is that a $100 million player? 34 years old? No. Alex Cobb? No. So it's really the shortstops plus those names I just mentioned. Chris Bryant, maybe. Kevin Gossman, maybe. Marcus Semien, maybe. Freddie Freeman, maybe. I would think those 4 at least challenge $100 million, if not go over $100 million. I think it's more than plausible that they all go over it, or that 2 of them go over it and 2 don't, or 3 of them go over it and 1 don't. But even if they fall under, it's going to be very close. That's it, right? Like, who else are you giving $100 million guaranteed to? You want to give $100 million guaranteed to Michael Conforto? Do you? Does anybody at this point? Like, you like the production while he's on the field, and you think to yourself, boy, he's only, 28 years old. He's going to be 29 just before the season starts next year. But he played 81 games this year, and he has 2 other seasons in the big leagues where he played less than 110. Like, how much can you actually just buy this guy as a $100 million player, or even remotely close? And if you're Conforto, do you want to sign a 6-year, $100 million deal? Or do you want to sign a 1-year deal so you can go out next year and get a George Springer deal? I mean, it's real. There just aren't very many of those out there. So, and again, I'm not trying to pick on Chris, but looking at it as like, how many $100 million deals could the Mariners sign? Well, that's very market dependent, isn't it? And since you're probably not going to go get Freddie Freeman, like, really, nor should you at this point. Like, there are significantly better ways to spend your money. Spend the money, but spend it on pitching, spend it on somebody else, right? Who do you give it to? You're not going to do it just to do it. So I'm wondering who you give unless the Mariners get all of them, like, maybe they get an opportunity to give one of those guys the money that they want. Maybe Semien wants $130 million and the Mariners give it to him. Maybe Gossman wants 118 and they give it to him. Maybe they want 150 and the Mariners are like, and that would be understandable as long as they have a backup plan to, you know what I mean? Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket and end up with the same team you have right now. Like, this whole idea that they have to add certain amount of payroll or they didn't commit to winning is just trash garbage. This is the group of folks that want owners to spend more money but can't separate what they would prefer owners did over what's realistic and having a realistic discussion about what the Mariners can and really can't do over the offseason. We're not talking about the Mariners ownership. We're talking about the Mariners baseball team. So until you go out there and you somehow change owners' approach to all of this, let's have a real conversation here. A real conversation. Because if we're talking about what owners can afford It's $500 million payrolls, every single last one of them. Not 200 million, not 300, $500 million. They can afford that. They can afford that. I'm not even sure that's a fair way to look at it. If they can afford it, they should do it. I don't even think that's fair. Should they spend significantly more than they do as a whole? Yes. Yes, they do. They should. They absolutely should. They can, and they should. What that number actually is, I don't know. But we can't, like, if you want to grasp on what's realistic this winter, like, don't think about it in how much payroll, what their payroll lands at, and the size of the contracts that they add. Like, I would look at it in two ways. One, how good does this roster look when they're done with it? And what does the payroll look like after if you get to a point in this offseason where like, this roster looks pretty good. Like, it's not great, but this roster looks pretty good. I absolutely see where they're going. And here's what's cool. They only have this much spent on payroll, which means they have lots more flexibility to continue to add to it appropriately as we move forward, right? Like, if you go, well, they still only have $100 million on payroll. They should have spent $50 million. That's not the way this works. That is short-term gain, and you block young players. If you never want young players to get the opportunity, a real opportunity. And if you're one of those folks out there that thinks a young player won't perform unless he pretty much performs in the first couple of tries, then that's fine. You be that kind of idiot. Go rub a lamp. Like, that's your approach to things. If you're the young players shouldn't get 3 or 4 different opportunities and owners should spend more money, you are what I like to call a rub a lamp fan. You're just out there wishing and hoping. Well, I mean, have fun with that. If that's your thing, great. It's not realistic, though. And it's not fun. I can't imagine that's fun for you. Out there hating everything. Like, why can't you just go, oh, yeah, okay. No matter how they did it, this roster is good. It's hard to look at this roster and go, this roster's not good. Like, if that's where you get come February, March, should it matter whether they spent $96 million on payroll, $87 million on payroll, or $118 million on payroll? Especially if you're not also going to look into like who they gave it to, how they structured the contracts, the kind of flexibility that leaves them to continue to add. Because again, it's not infinite money. But I'd rather sit here as a fan of the game, and I'd rather sit here as an observer of this baseball team in Seattle and not think that I can shame owners into spending more money by complaining about it all the time. And as many, I mean, you know, like if that's the approach you take, you and I don't have anything to talk about. I mean, there's no team in baseball that does that. There's no team in baseball that does that, right? Like, every team can afford $500 million or more on payroll, yet nobody has ever done that. Not one time in the history of the game. Again, you think they should? Great, cool, fine. Do you actually want to talk baseball, or do you want to just get mad at rich people? Because they're two completely different conversations. Because if you just want to get mad at rich people, getting mad at baseball owners is probably your last stop. It definitely should not be your first stop.